see terrible rain bombs, not even storms, rain bomb. One of the most fundamental laws of nature is that she gives you back what you give her.
Yes.
And basically, she's telling humanity, enough of your rubbish, enough of your nonsense. I have the one passport, my Nigerian passport, my green passport, which embarrasses me so much. We discovered that this guy had just killed somebody, murdered somebody down the road, and he came to our house, and when he drove, he saw lights. He saw these lights, and then he saw the soldiers there, and by that time, it was obviously high.
Desmond Olumuyiwa Majekodunmi.
You left out the Olukayode Olanrewaju Adekunle.
Yeah, I know. I was almost going to add gold to it. That's a beautiful thing about the Yoruba kid. Probably had 10 or more names.
I know.
Because every member of the family gave you a name.
They have to drop their name in there. It just goes on and on. But it is beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, such a pleasure sitting with you, and an honor and a privilege, to be sure.
The pleasure is definitely mine, because you guys, you're doing so many things in media.
Yeah.
And radio. That's the foundation of it all.
Yes, the foundation, and I can't wait to talk about that. You know, it just occurred to me. You'll be 75 in June. Goodness, you've got like 2.5 decades on me, and I look older.
Yeah.
What's the secret?
I don't know about that. And thanks for reminding me. Recently, some people have been calling me a grandpa, and sometimes when they say, I used to look around, who are they calling? I realized,
so that thing happens to all of us. The way I say it, you are going old when people start calling you uncle. Yeah. They start by calling you, hey, this boy, and then before you know it, people are calling you uncle.
Yes.
And then one day it just happens out of nowhere. Somebody calls you daddy.
Daddy. Yes, I know.
At that point, good Lord.
Time is moving on relentlessly.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
You are an environmentalist, a conservationist. It's your life's work. It's everything you do.
Absolutely.
I'm tempted to wonder, how did you get there? But I'm also tempted to just go back in time and hear stories of the past, how you are. The Desmond Majekodunmi. You don't even use any titles.
No,
I just plain old Mister.
Yeah. In fact, well, these days when people come, because we have this park, it's my farm. We'll get to that a little bit later.
Yes, certainly.
Converted into a park. But when people come, and they introduce me, my staff, so this is the chairman, and I meet them. I say, do you know who I am? And they're like, we're gonna go down that road, no? And some of them, bold young people say, so who are you? And I always carry this plastic picker, this long thing, the picker. And I say, well, actually, right now, I'm the chief plastic picker in this place. And they're like, well, we can't fault that. And I say, I'm very proud to be picking plastic, because I do that every day. I pick up plastic. We have other people picking as well, but it's so important to actually walk the talk. And it's no good just saying, okay, we have to look after the environment, take care of things, pick up all the plastic that's there. No, we actually had to show that we're ready to do it. But the terminology that you use, I really appreciate you, introducing me as an environmentalist. But I actually stopped being an environmentalist, almost over a decade ago. And I informed the progeny of one of the people that had really influenced me to become an environmentalist. I informed him that it was his father that had really, really persuaded me to become an environmentalist. But because of him, I had stopped being an environmentalist. And he was like, in his accent, because they have this sort of accent, he was like, oh, well, really? That's quite interesting. What happened? And that accent actually is what I'm sure you're a bit familiar with, what they call the Queen's English. And I know you would be familiar with that because you guys used to do a lot of that in your original. Yes. So this was actually Prince Charles before he became king, when he came to Nigeria. Yes. So I had to tell him that it was because of his father, who was at that time a prominent environmentalist himself. His father was the president of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, which was a massive environmental organization that had influenced people in Nigeria. People like Philip Asiodu, Ambassador Aduke Alakija, and several others, particularly Chief Esaledu, to start the Nigerian Conservation Foundation. Anyway, cut a long story short, the Duke of Edinburgh came across to Nigeria a couple of times. And I was very impressed by this. So I said, okay, I became a strong environmentalist because of the NCF. But then when Prince Charles gave a lecture, Femi, oh my God, this was when they were doing the G20 in the UK. And he invited all the world leaders to come to his palace to have lunch or dinner, whatever. And he said to them, I remember that speech, it resonated in my heart. He said, well, ladies and gentlemen, the reality is that climate change is beginning to cause catastrophic, irreversible consequences to our environment. And the reality is that we must stop this. And the way of stopping it is reducing the pollution, but particularly protecting our rainforests. And if we do not protect our rainforests, we shall be handing onto our children. In fact, he didn't use the word handing. He said, we shall be bequeathing onto our children a poisoned chalice, which means, Femi, in our own lingo, we could give our Peking calabash where poison day inside. I said, no, this is too serious. So that day, I said, okay, I'm an environmental activist. I'm no longer just an environmentalist. I'm dedicating my life to this because there's no way that I am going to be responsible or one of the people responsible for giving my children a cup of poison. This is my legacy to you children, who I profess to love. But meanwhile, because of my life support, because of my lifestyle and everything else, I've wrecked the very system that you will hold to keep you alive. But I also heard that a certain Mr. Femi grew up in a place in Nigeria where all he could see every day was green. I mean, he grew up near the Ibadan golf course.
Yes, just behind the Ibadan golf course, in a place called Links Reservation. That was my world as a kid. That was where I was literally born, and that was all I knew growing up. It was all greenery, trees, flowers, grass. That was just it, trees. And what was most interesting is that the houses didn't have fences. All the fencing was trees and flowers. So on the road, which was a tiny little road, very quiet place, sometimes you would celebrate when a car passes that it's not one of the neighbors coming home. So if you are not a neighbor coming home, occasionally there will be a military truck pass, because on the other side at the back of the house, there was a little bit of a military quarters where some senior military officer lived, his private home. So the golf course. So occasionally a military truck will pass, but every car that passed through the house was a neighbor down the road. So here's your house, the next house after house is partitioned in the middle by mostly flowers and trees, and the fence at the front of the house was all trees. And your neighbors were mostly British, some Americans, and as the years grew by, the Nigerian populations started to increase, especially those in power, House of Assembly individuals and all of that started to grow in those parts. But yes, that was the life, and I tell people, in my compound alone, we had some 23 mango trees, just mangoes. Mangoes. Guavas were aplenty. You couldn't keep count. Indian almonds everywhere. There were avocado trees. We had soursop trees. We had grapes and oranges, tangerines. If it was a fruit, you had it. Bananas, plantains at the back. We had 2 main coconut trees and maybe 3 or 4 smaller ones. And you knew how the fruits on each tree tasted. As a kid, you didn't know their species. You just knew these were guavas. But you knew the difference in taste of each of those guavas in each of those trees.
Yeah, and it's interesting because talking about fruit trees, it was actually a cashew tree that connected me to nature in such a strong way that it was a natural move to become environmentalist, to start farming later on in life. Because when I was about 7 years old, we moved to this house. I was born in a place, talking about green space, which, by the way, doesn't exist at all. It was a place that a lot of our young people, they don't know where this place is. They called it racecourse. Of course, you know where the racecourse is, which we now call what?
TBS.
Yeah. So I was born right next to this big green space where people used to do horse race. But later we moved when I was about 6. So there was this cashew tree that's in the compound. So I used to climb it and just enjoy being able to sit in the tree because cashew is quite resilient. The branches are strong. And then, of course, when it came to fruit season, you'll be sitting there, you pluck your fresh, reddish cashew, eat it, and then you gather the nuts. I'm bringing back some memories for you, because you know what we do with the nuts.
Yes, certainly, and roast them, and you know.
Yeah, the blessings of nature. So that sort of like connected me to, having a love for nature.
We've lost most of that these days. I took my kids to where I grew up a couple of years back, and my heart broke because most of those natural things are all gone. The golf course is still right there. Doesn't even look as properly, deliberately kept as it used to be, but at least that's there. But the bulk of the trees, the compounds, back in the day, house sat on at least an acre of land, at least, or 2. Now, there are just mushroom structures everywhere, and fences, and cement, no lawns.
No, it's inexcusable.
No lawns anymore.
And that's what I love about this studio that we're operating in, the Nigerian Info Cool FM studio, or the outside the box studio, I think.
Yeah, the greenery.
Greenery all over the place. Greenery all over the place. The trees, plants, you name it. Even inside this studio, I love that.
Thanks to the ever young of heart, Sada.
Honestly,
she's done such a job over the years.
Honestly, not just young at heart, young in visuality.
Yes, I know.
I bumped into her this morning. I didn't recognize her. I thought it was her daughter.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, lovers of nature tend to outlast haters of nature, or people who are just
so Femi is true.
Yeah.
Direct evidence. The Duke of Edinburgh that we were talking about, he was in his 90s when he passed. The people that started the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, none of them have passed before 90. I think one of them was 87, 88, something like that. They all went into their 90s. Chief Ledu, and he passed peacefully. How much more peaceful can it be than you call your friends for your 90th birthday and you wish everybody good night with a smile on your face, and then the next morning, boom, you're jointly gone. And you're so friendly as well, because your friends are all around and they do the necessary without having to come back. Nature really, we need to. It's our life support system.
It certainly is. And I often tell people, if you don't believe me, experiment. Have some few plants around your immediate vicinity and see how the air changes.
Exactly.
It just changes. I used to perform an experiment with my kids. There was this particular place that had a lot of trees, and then we would drive through that place. We would park, and I would say, let's walk through. So we'll start walking from one end before you get to the trees. Now, the trees are far away. They're not even close together. So I'm not talking about shade. I'm just talking about the air. And sometimes it's at night. So it's not because there is the sun. So you're walking down there. You start walking before you get to the trees. And you get to the trees. And I ask you, what did you notice? The air changes. It is cooler. It is fresher.
Exactly.
And then you walk the length. And once you get to the other side, it changes again. So the oxygen levels literally change.
Absolutely. And we did a bit of research into that, because what you're describing is almost as if you're walking inside our Lufasi Park. And this is what we get from the people who visit the park, because we did what they call agroforestry. I've done a stint in Kenya with Columbia Broadcasting for about 3 years in Nairobi, and that was it. Because, Femi, you know that in the weekend, the Kenyans in Nairobi, they would abandon the city. Half of the people would leave for the weekend, and they go to what they call their shamba, which is Swahili for farm. All of them had their hand in some little agriculture just on the outskirts, And I was so inspired. And talking about fruit, come and see some of the size of their avocados. You think that is a pawpaw. So I was so inspired. I said, may I have to get back to the land. So when I came back to Nigeria from that, I started this farm. But we did, luckily, I did a crash course at one of the top international institutes, again, in Ibadan. I remember good memories of Ibadan. IITA. And they persuaded me that I should be doing what they call agroforestry, which is not messing up too much with what you find there, the natural forest. Clear it a little bit, grow what you have to grow inside, and just know that...
Don't alter the dynamics.
Exactly. Don't alter the dynamics.
And which is what I've noticed you did at the Lufasi Park, because I've been there twice. Well, by the way, for those who wonder what Lufasi means, what does it mean?
Lekki Urban Forest Animal Sanctuary Initiative. Lufasi.
Beautiful.
Yeah, just after Aja on the right.
Beautiful. I went there with my kids, my entire family, and there was this part of the place. There was this one extreme part. In fact, there was, I think at that time, years ago when I first got there were certain parts of the park that were still relatively off limits, maybe because of, I don't know, maybe because of the natural habitat for, but you could see birds, massive birds.
Oh, yes.
A bit of an encounter. One of my kids was scared that he was going to get whisked by one of those gigantic.
The hawk will come that way. Not with daddy around.
Yes, certainly. But I looked at that, and it told me, it gave me such an insight into the person, Desmond Majekodunmi, because you looked at that whole space and you saw conservation, you saw nature, you saw everything. The average Nigerian will look at that and think new estate.
This one are real estate.
Build up a couple of estates and all of that place. I'm propelled to say thank you for that.
Yeah, it was my pleasure and joy, because we now use it as actually a sanctuary to tune people, because they come in immediately, they feel so relaxed, because all the essence of the trees is coming out, But apart from the oxygen, we now discovered when we did a bit of research, which the Japanese had been doing, and they had termed it Shinrin Yoku, which in Japanese is forest bathing. And it's something that the Japanese do a lot. It's one of the reasons why they're some of the oldest living people in the world.
No doubt.
The diet on the forest. Apparently, the trees give off phytoncides. They give off very, very fine little chemical, which they use to protect themselves from insects and so on. But this chemical, when it interacts in the human metabolism, now enriches your metabolism and does this wonderful thing within you that actually helps you to stay young. Well, I believe it, but I was wondering why, after being in that park for almost 20 years, I still have all my gray hair. Anyway, it's okay.
But again, then you're reminded that you for the longest time you probably notice that you've remained much the same.
Absolutely.
And, much the same.
Yes.
You could even argue that sometimes it almost feels you are aging in reverse.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Nature does that.
You did mention, though, your encounter with the now king years ago.
Yes.
You studied in the UK, didn't you?
King Charles. Yeah, for a while. And it was a little bit of because by that time I was deep into music and I was playing drums and so on, and I'd actually been I'd been recruited into what became a top first class band in Dublin, Ireland. Called Thin Lizzy. It was called. They had a couple of #1 hits and all this kind of thing to play drum. But I thought about it that, the son of Dr. Majekodunmi sitting at the dinner table. And this one, my son Shola has just finished his law. This one, Shade has finished medicine. And then my dad's turn. Yeah, well, Desmond is playing drums in a rock and roll band. In those days,
I know how parents used to see these things.
In those days, I mean now because
in Yoruba land they would say, Omo mi adomo alagbe. That's what they used to call it. It was almost like the art form itself was akin to penury and begging.
I know it was
because especially the musicians will hail people who will give them money.
Yeah, exactly. And it's only recently with people like Davido and so on who it's now become obviously something that is. So I say I can't do that to my dad. So I was still doing the music in the background. So I got a job as a trainee as an what they call electroacoustic engineer.
Beautiful.
Which is basically you're on the studio, you're doing studio engineering and eventually production. And was actually, they told me I was the first black producer in engineer in London. Anyway, so that's how it sort of gravitated. I went to Norwich City College to study some of that.
That's England's Norfolk. England's Norfolk County.
Yes.
Southeast of centre.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Where they have that slightly funny sort of accent, but it's not the real Cockney accent.
It's not real Cockney.
Mate. You're all right.
So, quite musical.
Yeah, but it was a good experience, and I was actually quite impressed by the British. What they were doing there in their country. I was impressed, despite, all the negativities of the colonial intervention. And obviously a lot of the wealth of their empire came because they had robbed the colonies. But I was impressed with the system. The system was a system that served the people more than I felt it served the individuals who were in the leadership positions of the system. And I was quite impressed with that, especially coming from a country where it was individuals had now got a stranglehold on the leadership of the system, and they were making the system start to serve them. So it was quite an interesting experience. But I was so happy to come back because just like mango and coconut and cashew, they don't like the weather in England. Me too.
You.
I don't like English weather at all.
Was it lonely though? I mean, Norwich back in the day couldn't have had quite a heavy African population.
Yeah. I mean, you'd walk around, people would sort of look, that's a colored fellow, But I never got any negativities from that at all, And some of my other brothers and sisters out there said, they had some issues, but I never got it at all, In fact, the only one that I got was once two guys were walking by, and I think they brushed into me either on purpose or mistake. So one of them said, "Hey, come on, darky," and then but his friend said, "No, he's a colored gentleman." So they said, "I'm gentleman." I didn't tell them I'm no big gentleman at all. No.
You be African man, original,
which is why I have only one passport.
Fantastic.
I could have two. I could have an American passport. My late wife was an American citizen, even though she grew up most of her life here in Nigeria. And I never took her passport. My mother was a British citizen, one of the first people to get Nigerian nationality, Nigerian passport. I never took her passport either. I have the one passport, my Nigerian passport, my green passport, which embarrasses me so much. But I know, Femi, that the time is very soon coming when we shall be able to hold that passport very, very proudly in our hands and say we are proud to be citizens of this particular nation, Niger. I know that. I can feel it coming. We're on the verge of it now. Oh, yes. They say the darkest hour.
Yes, it's just before dawn.
I
mean, talking about your mother and your late, dear wife, it makes me think a little bit of your childhood. Your mother was British, and she was married to a Nigerian man. Was that his home state?
Yeah, Ogun State.
Ogun State.
Well, that's where he was born.
Yeah.
But if we're going to go into indigene and so on, then eventually you'll have to take him back to Ibadan. Because the Egba is originally.
Yes, most certainly.
Anyway, Ogun State is where he was born.
Most certainly. A minister of health
yes.
in Nigeria in the First Republic. First Republic.
Yeah. Prime Minister Balewa kind of like coerced him because he was a doctor all the way. He met my mom in Ireland, in Dublin, and he just wanted to study medicine, obstetrician, gynecologist. But because of my mother's accent, she was in the Prime Minister's office. You see, in those days, the British were very class conscious, and the governors of their colonies were actually, most of them came from the semi or even aristocratic class. And the aristocracy in Britain, they had their own English accent, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, as you alluded to earlier.
Oh, certainly.
Yes, jolly good. It's really nice. Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, so the street language for it is Queen's English, but it's also called RP, received pronunciation. It's the sound of the aristocracy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So because she grew up
and very, very pristine too.
Very pristine. For me, the way you even said the pristine. Pristine. We can tell that you have already also been inside that one. Because in the radio, originally, that's, So, just to cut it short, So, because of her accent, she was drawn into the Governor General's office as a social secretary. And, they felt, okay, she's married to, an enlightened Nigerian who's been educated in our institution. So, the Prime Minister's office took over the Governor General's office. So he sort of adopted her. And that's how he got to know the old man. And after several years, he persuaded him to join his cabinet. and he was a very humble guy. He'd drive himself to the house in the evening, drive himself, no entourage, no nothing, just one bodyguard kind of guy who'd sit in the car, and we'd play Scrabble. And my mother chastised me once when we were playing Scrabble, and I called him, Malam, is that your move? My mother said, Desmond, you're talking to the Prime Minister. You can't just call him Malam like that, And he said, Nora, because he had that accent as well. Nora, don't worry, leave Desmond alone.
Yeah.
It's all right. Da, da, da. So, yeah, that's how he sort of gravitated into the politics, which to an extent he regretted, but he felt, well, once he's there, and that was the deal, at least if you're going to bring me in there, I have to have the ability and the allowance to ensure that we start developing our public health sector. That's how General Hospital got going, Massey Street Hospital, and several of the other hospitals actually, took off in a good way under his guidance.
This was before the Civil War. As a kid growing up back then, and I know that your mom also founded a very, one of the more respectable Nigerian schools,
Corona School,
which you attended.
I attended that. Yeah,
I think that was before King's College.
Yes. I mean, she wasn't actually the founder per se, but she was the first chairman. So she was, she was close to the people that started.
Okay. So, growing up, what was the Civil War years like? Was it profound for you as a young person? Growing up, was there fear in the family? Was your dad ever at risk of trouble or anything? How did you process it?
He was on the hit list with for the coup. Yeah, and in fact, he got a warning for the coup because they had what they call hotline. And he got a call from the Prime Minister that Koye, something is going on. You better try to, and then boom, the line went dead. And then there were one lorry load of soldiers came and parked outside our front gate. There was a driveway, and they parked outside the gate, and we were wondering what's going on. And then, bim, power failure, because part of the coup was the first thing they did was they took over the power stations. And in those days, by the way, you didn't have power failure.
No.
People didn't have generators.
No, certainly not.
Yeah. And so, boom, that was the first thing. Take over the power stations, cut off all the lights, and then cut off the communications. And then those soldiers were sitting there. Apparently, we discovered later that they were just waiting for the instruction from one particular officer. It was quite a well-planned coup. And that officer had already gone and slaughtered somebody, I think it was Okotiebo, in the Koi Hotel. And he was supposed to come. He came to our house, but you see, God is an incredible God. Because some months back, before that, my dad had paid a visit to Norway. And they gave him some very nice gas lanterns, these big, tall, bright gas lanterns, which he used in the front compound on the driveway. And we always put the lanterns on because they gave a much nice glow, not this bright light, And apparently, because we saw around midnight, after midnight, this Army Peugeot drove in, and then he drove. We discovered that this guy had just killed somebody, murdered somebody down the road, and he came to our house, and when he drove in, he saw lights. He saw these lights, and then he saw the soldiers there, and by that time, he was obviously hyped up, so he panicked, and he turned around and ran away. And so about 4 or 5 in the morning.
How's there light? We took out all the lights.
Yes, exactly.
You have lights.
Has his school failed? Are these soldiers guarding him? Are they for me? So, yeah. It was weird, man. So about 4 or 5 in the morning, those soldiers, they knew something wasn't right. They took off. Yeah, so, our lives were saved. I had gone and got my air rifle anyway.
Like if I'm, your mind was, if I'm going down, I'm going down like a man, standing. And I'm not going down alone.
Yeah, but it was so sad.
You must have been what? 15, 16 at the time?
I was in my early teens. It was a prelude to to this awful thing that happened in our nation. And it was just, sadness, deep sadness in the heart and soul and mind of my parents, because they also were so excited about this new nation,
the prospects
of Nigeria, which, had broken the yoke of colonialism. And because of the quality of the caliber of the various leaders, they would not have been so susceptible to the yoke of neo-colonialism, especially that brought about through commercial activities. They were proud of their nation, and there was an integrity there amongst them that is quite rare to see now. It's not that they were far from perfect, but they were proud of the agitations of just getting independence in the first place. It wasn't easy. So yes, it was just sadness all the way. It got worse and worse, and they had a lot of Igbo friends, and it was like what's going on? What's going on? All this racial tension, all this ethnicity nonsense is going on. It was a very, very sad time, and everybody was quite delighted when it finally ended. But they never really, the old man, he was saddened by the whole process, the degenerating of the whole political system and so on. It was not a happy time for them, and we're still feeling the after effects till today. We haven't recovered from that massive, ridiculous, nonsensical aberration that took place, called our first coup, and then our second coup, and then the
full-blown civil war.
What nonsense!
Yeah, it's a very painful blot in the nation's history.
I can imagine. And you were aware of it as well. You were old enough.
Well, no, I wasn't. To be honest with you, I was not. So I used to hear things from my eldest brother who saw a bit of it. My mother herself, at some point during the war, had been conscripted into the army, and she had fought, and she had been captured at a point. There's this, a lot of stories. My dad was in Ibadan during the Civil War. Ibadan was pretty sane compared to most of these other places, but not so sane, because even Akintola and those names, these people were literally buried in Ibadan, murdered along those roads. The Abeokuta road, the stories are unending. The things, the atrocities, and because of the larger unfolding of the coups and the war, there was a lot of skirmishes, small pockets of violence, tribal things everywhere. So people really suffered at the time, and you didn't know. My father is from Akwa Ibom, for instance, and here he was growing up in Ibadan, and back in the day, many of the locals could not even tell the difference between an Ibibio man from or Cross Riverian from an Igbo. It was just everybody. Everybody was Ajokutamamumi. Everybody was Yamiri and all of that. So you didn't know what was going to happen. The same was happening to people in the East who were Yorubas in the East. People were literally fearing for their lives.
Exactly.
Not to even mention all the paranoia in the East, and there's so many people who lost their lives.
Yes. And
most senseless.
Yes, for me. And the most painful part to me in reflection was that despite the fact that there was such a big diversity of ethnicities, we were beginning to come together and enjoy our differences. And you'd see that in the media. Village headmaster.
Yes, certainly.
The classic example.
Certainly.
Classic
Certainly.
example. And, we'd say, this one is speaking with one
what's the name of, what's the man who used to say, the doctor?
Yeah.
Is it Dr. Do Good or something?
Very...
village headmaster,
and different accents.
Different accents.
It was the beginning of what would have been, I think the Brits they wanted a bit of divide and rule, and there was some type of, sort of wrong prioritization.
Yeah.
But what I was seeing was eventually the younger people enjoying the differences, because it's from there you had so many intermarriages now.
Certainly.
The Yoruba will be going to school with the Akwa Ibom, will be going to school with the university with so and so. And, there was a coming together. And for me, this was something obviously, very, very beautiful. Because, I'm, my mother was, a Caucasian white. My father was Black African. And I think I must have been about 9 or 10 or so when I realized that, if I, as a so-called half-caste, had been born in South Africa, I would be illegal. And I was like, eh? What kind of, I look in the mirror and say, so I'm illegal. What kind of rubbish is this? And I think that sort of brought out a little bit of the rebelliousness in me when I now realize that, well, a lot of what we human beings get up to is actually just rubbish and nonsense.
Yeah, nothing buggers really.
Exactly.
We it's like we jettison the most fundamental facts about human life.
Yes.
Our ancestry, whatever the color, whatever the shades.
Yes. And the irony for me is, I come from a medical family, so when I realized, and it's quite recently, that the DNA amongst all human beings is 99.2% identical.
No doubt.
It's that 0.8% that gives us a slight variation in melanin in here. Just to add a little bit of what they say, variety is what?
It's the spice of
the
life.
Spice of life. And it also helps to, strengthen the individuals as well, because you're drawing a little bit from other genes eventually at some stage. And come on, man. And so but it's interesting that, now we're now seeing that all that breaking down of ethnicity and having all these ethnic clashes and so on, and racialism and all this nonsense, is just one part of the huge battle that we have to take, for me, to persuade human beings that the time now, and I'm talking as an environmental activist, that the time has finally come for humanity to change its ways. Because all this wickedness or selfishness or whatever that brings about this rubbish, we've been perpetrating it against each other. And as you said, doing horrendous, hideous things like that civil war. What kind of rubbish is that? But is that the only war? Look at all the other nonsense things that we've been doing. Okay, we've been doing it against ourselves. However, now, Femi, we're doing it against nature. And one of the most fundamental laws of nature is that she gives you back what you give her.
Yes.
And basically, she's telling humanity, enough of your rubbish, enough of your nonsense. Because of your greed and your selfishness, you have the audacity and the total stupidity and foolishness to start wrecking your very life support systems. I'm going to give it back to you. And that's why 2024 classified as the hottest year humanity has ever experienced. On the back of 2023, hottest year. The last decade, hottest decade. Massive plastic pollution. There's a breakdown of our systems, which is why I was so proud of that King Charles or Prince Charles when he said in their own language that, nature's going to be giving it back, and we shall be bequeathing unto our children a poisoned chalice. I said, no way. We no go give our Peking calabash where poison dey inside. And we're doing that because of that nonsense that expresses itself as intertribal war, intertribal this, that, and the other. So yeah, it was a sad experience, but I think that the young people of Nigeria I've learned from it indirectly. I believe so, because I have a lot of faith in the young people. You interact with young people a lot.
A lot, a whole lot.
And I mean, when I come here, I see so many young guys, they get dreadlocked in, this, that, you know. I mean, surely that gives you some encouragement as well.
It does. It also gives me concern to note that on the one hand, you have people who are motivated. The world becoming a global village has helped enlighten a lot of people, but so has it further perpetuated vices. And some experts say, take social media, for instance, which is a crumbling of the barriers, supposedly. On the one hand, it has brought people closer together. On the other hand, it's pushed people far up away from it. You know, in terms of ideology, people fall into their cocoons and all of that, and more. Just while on the other hand, people. Some people treat others with more respect. There's also a vast number of people who view others with even more disdain, lack of trust, trepidation, and all of that. Sometimes I wonder, with hope on the one hand, do you sometimes fear that the world, especially the West, looking at everything, I don't like to sit down and talk politics that much. But do you sometimes fear that the West might be pushing themselves slowly but surely, maybe inevitably or inexorably, into some sort of a global conflagration?
Yes, very, very close to that. I really, you've hit the nail right on the head. And the social media or the ease of communication now, I mean, it's just, amazing that you can be talking on a group call and you'll be seeing each other. So it's, again, being misused.
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It's a double-edged sword. Again, just like we misuse the wonderful gift of the spirit of creativity and invention. Gunpowder was originally supposed to be for fireworks. And then they now say, this thing can shoot projectile. So it became gun. Dynamite was meant to do different things.
Construction and all that, plastic rocks, and all of a sudden.
However, when they now developed the atomic bomb, which immediately stopped the Second World War, when the Japanese saw this thing, you can drop a bomb 50 kilometers away and just a wake-up call started coming into humanity, into the more reasonable leadership of humanity, that although they continued with the atomic weaponry for a while, and then the United Nations took over from the League of Nations, but eventually they got to the stage where they realized, this is, in fact, they call it MAD, mutually
assured destruction.
And they stopped the proliferation. So that consciousness is, I really, really believe, Femi, that consciousness is going to come back. In fact, it's already coming back, but on a far more broader spectrum. And whilst we're not seeing it now, we're going to start seeing more of it soon. I see us seeing the last stages of using the communication in a negative way. The negativity might arise. I see right-wing stuff coming up in the Western areas and so on, but they're going to even find it difficult to sustain that, because God Almighty is working out stuff for me. In fact, they had this big, what do they call it? The American football, the big Grand Bowl, or whatever what they call that.
The Super Bowl.
And the leading star artist that performed there, he was a black guy.
Certainly.
Solid. And in fact, the Uncle Sam image that they use, they have this Uncle Sam. It was one, and then you have people like Beyonce, And even though you might want to be a white racist, but when you wake up in the morning and you have Beyonce's picture on your wall in your bedroom, and you're looking at Beyonce, it's more and more difficult for you to become racist. So basically, the sports and the entertainment, it's bringing the young people together, but not as much as what we are doing to nature is going to do. And it's going to be sad. We're going to see some really, really terrible, catastrophic consequences of the climate change that we've caused in the earth. We're going to see terrible rain bombs, not even storms, rain bomb, where you just see maybe 1.5 years rain falling 4 or 5 hours, as happened in Valencia, Spain, by the way, or this massive tinderbox fires, drought. It's going to come and we're going to see it. But there's some very, very advanced souls now especially places like the United Nations, which is not a perfect organization, but there's some conscientious, advanced people there who are now telling us what we have done to nature is causing this, and we didn't need to do this. It's our selfishness. It's our greed. It's those negative aspects of our personality that you must change. And I see young people picking up on this. We're already seeing some of them who are doing it with 15, 16, 18 years old, who are doing it on a global level. And they're coming together and they're telling the world, they're telling each other, no, we got to change, And the beauty of it is that the template for the change is there in our scripture anyway. Yeah, it's there in our scripture. Is it the example of some of the great prophets that were in Islam? Or is it the example of our own Jesus Christ? It's there. Or if you don't even want to go into the scripture, even some of our people, our iconic figures in the entertainment industry, is it one particular guy who said, let's get together and feel all right. One love.
Bob Marley.
Yeah.
Do you sometimes worry that the institutions may eventually not do enough from history? I mean, the First World War gave birth to the League of Nations, and then the Second World War killed the League of Nations, and then the League of Nations rose again as the United Nations. There are some who believe that the post-World War II era that was born then in the last decade seems to have been winding down. The fear is what comes after that.
Yes.
The United Nations has really never succeeded in stopping the major powers from doing anything they wanted to do, have they?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right, Femi. And it is that fear. It's that fear that's going to inspire people, because, again, where do you want to take this warfare to? Madness, mutually assured, destruction, mutually assured. And the young people are going to wake up to this. They're already wakening up to it, Femi, because of the information that's out there and the ability to communicate that, no, we cannot go down that road anymore. But also, and this is very deeply spiritual, I'm sensing a fastening up of what they call the inviolable laws of retributive justice. And it's there in every scripture. It's there in the Holy Bible. There's the law of retribution. It's there in the Holy Quran.
You will reap what you sow.
You reap what you sow. Kifara is there in the Bhagavad Gita as karma. And this is coming out now. We're seeing, for me, it's an interesting time. It's a scary time. Because if we don't get the changes right, you can't even contemplate how bad it's going to be. But some of the badness that we've caused, with the climate degradation, it's not even the people fighting us, so it's the climate degradation, because it's affecting everybody. It's affecting everybody. You could be having some fight, or some neo-colonialists from France or wherever could be attacking indirectly your country in Africa, and that country in Africa is getting hit by heavy, heavy drought. That country that has sent them, maybe France, is getting hit by heavy flood. And we're talking of heavy, unprecedented, and never experienced in human history. And this is the shock waves are coming. This is why the top scientific organizations, they're panicking. And they're telling people that, look, humanity has never experienced this before, this type of climate change. And they're seeing breaking down of very, very stable systems that have been stable for the last couple of thousands of years, that have allowed civilization to evolve, that have allowed mankind to reach the position that is reached. And the illusion that technology can solve it is it's a pure illusion. There's only so much that technology can do. So it's a very, very interesting time, but it's a time when human beings have to wake up to the reality that we need to be transformed, Femi. We need to have a renewal of our minds, and we need to behave in the kind of nice, friendly, loving way that I see happening right here in this your studio.
Yeah, I mean that's refreshing. You've expressed significant hope for Africa, for Nigeria, and
Definitely.
for Africa. Do you sometimes nurse some apprehension, though, that Africa could be made to bear the brunt of a disaster it did not contribute significantly to create?
Oh, yes. I mean, that's what's happening now. But this is also going to be a positive thing for us, and especially for Nigeria, because Nigeria is supposed to lead this movement for the subcontinent, that we have to come together. We have to pool our resources together. And Africa has the solution. In our forests, in our mangroves, we have the solution when it comes to having renewable, clean energy systems. Femi, we've got it all here in our land. Is it the minerals that you need for these long life batteries? Oh, it's here in abundance.
Yeah.
It's here.
Silicon, every single thing.
Every single thing is here, my
really
brother.
Rich.
We've got it under the ground, and we got it between the ears. Oh, yes. And then if you want to really see the beauty of Africa, well, we've got it in our people. Some of our women are pretty gorgeous as well, We got it going on, man. The only thing is the division. And we have to break down these foolish, silly, stupid barriers. The other day during the elections, they were asking, where are you from? And I was like, well, maybe I'll relocate to, I'm an indigene of, these days I tell people, man, I'm an indigene of this tiny little speck called planet Earth. Because if you want to break down that, okay, you have to go back, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation, go back to Abeokuta where your father was born, but then he has to go back to Ibadan. Come on, man. We have to evolve. And this is what nature is telling humanity. Now you've reached the stage where you must now evolve to the next level. Have a renewal of your mind, that you are operating in the required likeness of God Almighty. And we have to acknowledge that He is Almighty. Femi, if I'm going to say that all, I'll say all. I'll be saying all for the next 1 year.
Well, certainly, just observing the universe humbles you. We are what? The Milky Way galaxy, which is just one of the smaller galaxies.
One of the smaller
galaxies. And one of, what does science tell us? Over 200-300 billion galaxies.
And inside
each with it is hundreds of billions of stars. The sun is insignificant in the Milky Way galaxy. And it's how many times larger than the Earth is the sun? And to just think about it, sometimes maybe people would take themselves a lot less seriously.
You know, and be far more humble. And also, because of the research we've been able to do, we've been able to see how magnificent this particular planet Earth is. That it has this wonderful atmosphere that is able to create the right type of environment to support life and so on. So it's a special, special place, man. And we dare to rebel against the God who was in the beginning before the beginning began. Guy, that's our God. That's our mighty, mighty, mighty God. Who tells us, well, just, follow basic principle. Love me. Love each other. That's why at Lufasi Park, our motto is loving nature. And then the sideline is, well, if you want to be loving nature, you got to have a loving nature.
No, not a doubt.
Peace and love, man.
Yeah, just two things that before we go. First, I just wanted to talk about your the music side of you. You are an author, a movie maker. People don't. I know you were working on a movie project. Was it a year or 2 years ago? I think
Yeah, I've done several stuff. In fact,
I think something commissioned by in Germany or something like that.
Yeah. That was more sort of documentary.
A documentary.
More sort of into documentary.
Okay.
Well, I dabbled in Nollywood a tiny little bit. With Rita and a couple of other dams. We did one thing with a guy called Dan Foster.
Oh, yeah.
And Zulu, Zico Kafo was the producer, so I thought, okay, this is good, this is interesting, but I need to focus a bit more on, because by that time I'd become more of an environmentalist, and I need to really, really focus on that. So yeah, one had gone into that. In fact, that particular documentary got me in trouble with Governor Fashola, because the title was Nigeria Under Attack. Climate change. And when we showed the worst case scenario of Lagos, if this thing continued, going underwater, just right up.
Yeah.
No, but he wasn't happy. Because at that time they had plans for the coast, and he said, this people.
but it's an open secret.
Yeah, but at that time it was quite.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but you see,
does anybody remember driving up a hill in Lagos?
Oh,
such a flat land.
Oh, it's a flat land.
It's a flat land.
It's a flat land.
I mean, if you've ever driven up a hill, tell me.
Yeah.
I've never driven up a hill in Lagos unless you're driving up a bridge.
Exactly.
The significance of that is that we have a major water-based tragedy.
Yeah.
There's no high ground.
Yeah, and it's brewing. I mean, we lost Bar Beach. Thank God they were able to reclaim that. Our coast is under tremendous pressure. But Fashola and his progressiveness, at first people told him, this person, they wants to spoil our plans. But then when he saw it, he watched it himself. And that's when he started the climate change conferences, because he realized, whoa, we better tune ourselves into this reality.
He did a bit. He did plant a few trees across Lagos. I don't know what has become of that.
Yeah.
I wish they planted more fruit trees. Because again,
more mango,
I wish people plant more fruit trees.
No, we're working on
every house planted a single tree, one single fruit.
At least.
Not only does it help, I didn't know that fruits were things you bought in the market until I was maybe past 10 years of age, or 10 to 15. I thought fruits were things everybody had.
Yes, no, when you saw it in your compound.
And quick, talking about your music, you did have an interaction with, you had interfaces, or did you work with Fela at any point?
Oh, yeah, I was supposed to produce him. You can't really produce Fela, he's a genius. So I did the engineer production of Suffering and Smiling.
Oh,
which was,
you did?
Yeah. It was, because I opened up the first multi-track 16-track studio in Lagos. There was an 8-track studio in Decca.
Okay.
But this was a 16-track. So yeah, we opened that up, and he came with his band, and it was an interesting interaction.
Do you have any outstanding memories of your interaction with him?
Yeah, fella. Yeah, just that he was a very generous, giving person. He really, he just give all the time, all day long. When he had to give, he'd give, and he was quite prophetic, But the typical genius, you have to treat them a little bit gently.
Yeah, creativity demands an outlet.
Yeah,
and sometimes it's madness or near it.
Yeah, but I also worked with Victor Wifo. We did some good stuff with him, and
Guitar Boy.
Yeah, good guy. Yeah.
You worked with Osadebi as well?
Yeah, way back. It was quite an honor to work with. There's very, very talented people. And, they even did a little bit of stuff with Sonny Ade in the UK. introduced Kiki Gayan to him, and they, did some stuff which they released, and it got into the lower charts. The only significant, really significant one was working with a band called Third World. Worked with them in the Bahamas on, they had a hit song, number one, Now That We Found Love, which is really, really cool. And you see, the thing is, when we really started the actual music with my wife, my late wife, because she was a great singer, she had 100% perfect pitch, and any note, serious, she'd be able to give it back immediately. So I can hardly sing, so she wouldn't allow me to sing. so I became,
that's not singing. Sounds more like croaking. So.
For people like her, it's like, I would occasionally be allowed to do one or two backing tracks if I was very, very careful to hit the right pitch. So I became the rapper in our band, and we made a couple of records. One of them was a record that we produced. We presented to the Duke of Edinburgh again. He loved it because it was all about nature. Every single track was nature. But I was rapping in there, and he found that a little bit strange, because at that time nobody was doing much with this thing called rap. But it was happening, and but we went to Virgin Records, in the UK. That's Richard Branson, a letter from the palace that they should release this.
The one and only Richard Branson.
Richard, correct guy, man. And when he saw, we should release he sent us to his managers, and the managers said, wow, beautiful, beautiful voice, nice music, but every track is about the environment. Okay, you know what we do? We'll just do one or maybe two environment tracks, and then we'll do more commercials. So me and Sheila walked out of the place. I said, no. In hindsight, it was like, we missed a golden opportunity there, should have compromised. But by that time, we realized how important it was doing things about the environment, and sensitizing people about the need to care for nature. With lyrics like, when you wake up in the morning and you breathe, give thanks to Mother Nature for those trees and all those green leaves, so you and I can breathe, which she sung so beautifully. And then the other one is, now that the greed motivation moving on the fast lane, industrialists, they play a dangerous game, falling all around a lot of acid rain, this whole situation getting insane. Now all the little children gonna grow up, gonna check out old school rap.
Goodness.
But the whole rap thing, I mean, what's your take on that? It's really, I mean, this guy that was singing of the bowl, the American football, I mean, he was a rapper all the way.
Yeah, certainly, which was, a new one. It was rap became a bit of a revolution, and it was also dubbed the music of rebellion because it was a sound of activism, and it continues to go. It hasn't covered itself in glory because it's been largely associated with a great deal of how do I say it now, from the drugs to the killings and the shootings and the people who started the gangsterism and the people who started it were activism inclined individuals who wanted to pass a message and who literally were rebelling against what they perceived as faltering course of civilization, of leadership, and all of that. It's and it's evolved over time to the point where rap in itself as a genre has lost some of its steam over the years. But again, history has always told us that nothing is new. There's nothing new under the sun. Fads, fancies, they go around, they come around, they rest a bit, they come back. Hardly do you get anything that's entirely new of itself. I mean, see how Afrobeats became Afrobeats. With just an S in it. And then people, so-called experts, will try to explain it, why this one is that and all of that. But you trace everything back to Fela, and some will trace Fela's influences further back and all of that.
The high life aspect and all that. But the young, I noticed just recently quite a lot of the young Nigerian artists are doing sort of like their form of rap as well.
Yes, certainly. I mean, again, there has been an explosion of local rap, rapping in the languages of the people, which is becoming more and more. When it first started, it was quite novel amongst the Yorubas. People remember some of the young pioneers like the late Dag Green and these individuals who got their foot stuck in there. Those in the eastern part of Nigeria will remember people like what's his name now, Nigga Raw, which is his name, and these guys who took it like Fino, who took it to the levels, and there are even Hausa rappers, and every tribe has its own bit of musically inclined activists who use rap because it forces people to pay attention a little more to the spoken word than the rhythm.
The message
to get the message out, and to do it in rapid pace and all of that. It's pretty interesting.
It is. It's an interesting development. I mean, don't you see don't you feel that what's going on here in Nigeria, but West Africa generally, is also an indicator that we are getting into a position to start to bring influence to the global.
Yeah, to be sure, the global sphere is paying attention. A lot of attention is being paid to this part. Much of it for good, but sometimes too it comes with its own challenges. They say the battlefields have shifted, and the battles are being fought everywhere now. In Nigeria, for instance, there are those who will tell you that there are little battles that Nigerians are not themselves aware of. Was going on by the powers, the bigger nations. Everybody jostling and fighting for their own little piece of the cake. In northern Nigeria, you go to the very rural places. You talked about the mineral resources, and you find countries or nationals, people there and mining for this, mining for that, and sometimes you fear, you wish that the power of diplomacy will prevail at the end of the day, but sometimes when diplomacy fails, things more sinister tend to take the place of diplomacy. A case in point is the whole France story, where there were rumors that the French are positioning in northern parts of Nigeria in order to deal with some recalcitrant African nations who, like Niger and all of that. And those rumors, if they are not handled properly, it could escalate into some sub-regional skirmishes that could lead to the loss of lives of innocents.
It could escalate. It could escalate.
Somehow you just wish that the people in charge know what they're doing. And if they don't, they better start asking themselves the tough questions.
Absolutely.
Because when two elephants fight, the ground suffers.
The ground suffers, yes. However, I'm seeing this again. I'll reiterate this. It's like you can describe it almost as if the floodgates of divinely orchestrated retributive justice are beginning to open now. And floodgates, that's what keeps the dam water back, man. When that opens, And they better be very, very careful for themselves. And for me, part of the challenge I believe we have, not just Nigeria, just globally, as people, is recognizing our true identity. I am not this physical body. This is just the coat. This is just the housing. I am a spirit soul. I'm an energy force that can never be created or destroyed. Just take another form. And you better be very, very careful what you do when you are in this physical embodiment. Be very careful what you perpetrate, because that will determine the form that energy source will take. Law of retribution, law of karma. Or if you know sabi that one, you cannot plant cassava and harvest cocoa yam.
It's not possible. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I will just do one final ask of you. You are a well-traveled man. You are a man you are a Nigerian, true Nigerian, but you could quite easily claim multiple nationalities, even though you have insisted on being Nigerian and Nigerian alone. If you were asked in one of your trips abroad, if somebody in the West asked you to share something about Nigeria that people generally do not know, and you could take a moment to consider, and you wanted to sell Nigeria, what would you tell them?
I would remind them that a research was done, very serious research some years back. And, we were going through pretty tough times, maybe not quite as tough as the times now. But the research had determined that some of the happiest people in the whole world live in this place called Nigeria. That we are actually really, truly some of the happiest, warmest, friendliest people. You'll see maybe somebody just has a small accident on the road, just a little one, not talking about, within no time at all, everybody has gathered around. Okay, what can I do? Let me help you. Let me do. Or you go to somebody's house and they're about to eat. Why join now? You have to join. Join me. We're one of the most hospitable, happiest, warmest, friendliest people. And we just have a few issues that we need to clear ourselves of. Like other human beings, we have to go through this transformation. But for me, the most exciting thing about Nigerians is that we know there is a God. We call him different names, but we know there is a God. And unfortunately, we're getting a bit contaminated with some of the outside influences, which are now sort of obfuscating that reality within us, that we're identifying too much with our flesh than our spirit. But we know there is a God, and that's so, so, so important. And Nigeria is going to preach that practically to the whole world, that there is a God, almighty, who created the universe as you so eloquently described it. Yeah, that's who Nigerians are.
Mr. Desmond Majekodunmi, I could never pay for this conversation. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Shobnoku. Femi Obong-Daniels.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure.
It's been fantastic talking to you.
And congratulations with what you guys are doing with this incredible place, man. You guys are reaching out to people. My heart goes out to you, because it must be so, especially the Nigeria info side of it. Whoa.
We keep trying.
On World Radio Day last Wednesday, I was asking Sherry if he'd ever been apprehended. He said 2 times.
2 times, yeah.
Marianne said that they'd arrested her too.
A number of times, yeah.
Have you ever crossed the line?
Because, in 30 years of my broadcast career, personally, I do not, on air, for personal reasons, I make it, I I make a point not to. I'm a bit of a social commentator. I don't dabble into the politics of it, and the reason why I don't dabble into the politics of it is because I have always strived to make sure that I maintain some level of political neutrality. And it's hard because you get sucked in.
I can imagine.
I am more into human angle conversations. So which are pretty generic. Poverty, good governance, rather than one political party can do better than the other. Because at the end of the day, when you go back through history, we've tended to go from bad to worse in terms of political leadership. And people with genuine intention, they come, they say, win some things and all of that. And then when they're going to get into power, you ask yourself, is it that the system does that to you? Is it that in the process of getting into power, you lose your actual soul, your innermost motivations? Do you surrender to the system? Sometimes it's my father used to say there was a reason why Jesus refused to be made king when he was offered more than once. And he kept refusing. And he lived at a time when at least the local population were convinced that he was the answer to their problems. But what they were thinking of was their political and economic problems. He saw it differently, which was why he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." You can wing that however you may, but the point is, he knew something that most people do not know. And how do you know he was convinced about that? On the night he died, in his last conversation with his disciples, he told them, "You are no part of the world, just as I am no part of the world." And then in prayer he said, "These people you've given to me, they are no part of the world, just as I am no part of the world. I beg of you, not that to take them out of the world, because you live in the world." But what he was telling them was, don't get sucked in by the world's politics. And so, people say, well, if good people don't get involved in politics, what will be left?
That's the challenge.
Yeah, so that's the challenge. And then yes, true. If good people don't get into politics, what will be left? But the answer to that is, in your life experience, have you known of good people who went into politics? And then you will probably count one or two. And then the next question is, what became of them?
Well, Nelson Mandela lived a long life.
Yes, he lived a long life. Nelson Mandela, however, much of his life was, activism, spent, and then he had, how many years of presidency?
I think it was one term.
1 term, 4 years. He was wise not to run again. But even then, you could argue that those years, the turbulence of those years, even from a family point of view, it takes a whole lot. We've seen elder statesmen. I can't forget what Nigeria did to Tai Solarin, for instance. And sometimes you wonder, what if this person had been? What if? And then you are reminded, how about those that did happen? What became of them? In 2003, the subject was change.
Yeah,
What did he do?
It can be quite off-putting.
Yeah. In 2008, I remember quite vividly how the whole world was in celebration when Obama became president. 8 years later, it gave birth to Trump.
Yeah.
So there's the individual, but then there's the system.
And it's that system now, Femi.
Yeah.
That nature herself is going to tell the system that what are you, system? You are the system that is driving the wrecking of your very life support.
Yeah.
Forget it. No, there's positive changes coming, man. Very, very optimistic.
Thank you. I mean, if I could ask you if there is any of your life's choices that you regret, or at least something that you wish you had the power of a remix, what would that be?
Yeah, very, very few. In fact, there's only two that I can recall, and the one I can recall the most is my lack of fluency in the Yoruba language. Oh, it wasn't entirely my choice. I grew up in a home where English was spoken all the time, and at that time it was like you have to even speak the Queen's English.
Yes. Your parents made certain of it.
Yes, and then King's College. The law there is no speaking of binoculars.
No.
No Yoruba there.
I think that was anyway. Binoculars.
And then I was able to manipulate my way out of King's College, which was an all-male school, when I heard that there was a co-educational school in Ibadan. Forget it. I went there, and that was a wonderful experience, growing up with beautiful young ladies and so on. But again, it was an international school, so no so-called binocular there, and then going overseas, and I regret not pushing myself to learn Yoruba better, because it's a beautiful language. It just flows so nicely. It's got so many nice inflections. So I think that's my biggest regret in life.
I think it continues. I mean, the generations have lost that little bit. Science says a young child can handle 13 languages at the same level if exposed to it. A young mind can handle 13 languaends at the same level. Wow. What a missed opportunity to not take.
Exactly.
And parents tend to, because you want your children to speak high-end English and all of that. They even the schools, like you said, back in the day, you could be punished for speaking vernacular, and we lost. I mean, these generations lost fantastic opportunities.
Yes,
and individuals who managed to beat that whole thing. I know someone who speaks anywhere between 5 and 8 languages, for instance. It's a fantastic opportunity because it doesn't deprive you of anything. It's all plus and no minus.
All plus because it expands your brain capacity and so on, and you're able to communicate in a more effective way and understand things a lot better.
We share that in common, by the way. I speak decent Yoruba, but I had the opportunity to speak fantastic Efik or Ibibio, Igbo, even Hausa. Because of my mixed roots.
You were exposed to all
yes,
that.
and exposure early on. I wish I'd taken it. I really wish I'd taken it like you.
Yeah. So maybe we should try to encourage the education system to, I think they're doing a bit of that now anyway. To do it a bit more, tune into some of the local languages. They're lovely. The way that they flow and so on. It's a lovely aspect of the variety that is the spice of life, Yes.
No doubt.
So, yes, I think that's the biggest regret. And as for that, after that, no major regrets. It's all a learning curve, if it goes wrong, then you learn from it and make sure it goes right in future.
Thank you.
My pleasure.